Amen. Thank you, Kenneth. Okay, Brother Frank.
Something a little bit different tonight, outside of what we normally. Hello, hello, hello. It's on. Hello? Can you hear me? Now we can. Okay, good. Thank you, Kenneth. We're going to have a video. It's about 27 minutes long, and probably 15 seconds to be exact. But it's a little different. We're just not going to trace the steps we've gone through the book, and he's not going to just talk about leadership like a lot of them do. The traits that Nehemiah showed as he led the people, and they were great, they're good, they're very valuable for those in that position. But he takes it from the angle of how is the book beneficial to the average person. And he points out some specific ways and lessons that we can learn from that, and not a whole bunch of them that you can't remember them, but he gets right to the point on each one. And then after that, we're going to have just a little bit of time of sharing what about 3 or 4 things from the book. I'm going to take a long time doing it, so Matthias is going to be when I ask you to answer and you raise your hand. Wait till he gets to you so everybody can hear you, and that'll benefit everybody. And then I have some closing comments. I want to tell you right now we have some extra sheets that have been left over, not of every session, but of some of the sessions. If you didn't get some and you'd like to have some, there's extra copies up here, and also a copy of the map of the wall, building of the wall around Jerusalem, so you can see a mile and how it went around the city if you didn't lost yours or need a copy of it. So we'll go ahead with the video, and then we'll have our discussion time.
Every few years, a business book comes out with Nehemiah in the title, The Rebuilder of Broken Walls, the ancient project manager, the crisis leader who mobilized a demoralized people, defeated organized opposition, and completed an infrastructure project in 52 days that his enemies had been counting on never getting done. And they are not wrong to find leadership wisdom in Nehemiah. The book is genuinely full of it. Vision casting, stakeholder analysis, opposition management, team motivation, crisis response, resource allocation under pressure. It is all there in a Hebrew text from the 5th century BC, functioning with the precision of a modern case study. But there is a problem with turning Nehemiah into a leadership manual. Most of those readings extract the strategy and leave the theology behind. And once that happens, once you take the walls out of Nehemiah and leave Nehemiah out of the walls, you end up with a project management guide that has quietly removed the one thing Nehemiah himself would say actually built the wall. Because Nehemiah does not think he is a great leader. He thinks he is a man who prayed and then moved. The distance between those two readings of the same story is the distance between two completely different understandings of how anything actually gets done. To feel the full weight of Nehemiah, you have to start where the book starts, not with the wall. With a man weeping, Nehemiah 1:1-4. the words of Nehemiah, son of Hakaliah. In the month of Chislev, in the 20th year, as I was in Susa the citadel, Hanani, one of my brothers, came with certain men from Judah, and I asked them concerning the Jews who escaped, who had survived the exile, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said to me, the remnant there in the province who have survived the exile is in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates are destroyed by fire. As soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days, and I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. He sits down, he weeps, he fasts for days. The wall of Jerusalem had been broken since the Babylonian invasion in 586 BC. That is more than 140 years before this moment. Nehemiah is not receiving breaking news. The city has been in ruins for a century and a half. Multiple waves of exiles have returned. Zerubbabel rebuilt the temple decades earlier, and the walls are still down. This is old news, known news, but something about hearing it said out loud by someone who had just been there, someone with fresh eyes, someone who had looked at the rubble and the shame and the vulnerability of a city open to every enemy and every insult, breaks something open in Nehemiah. Leadership manuals usually begin with vision and move immediately to strategy. Nehemiah begins with grief, days of it. Before a single plan is formed, before a single resource is identified, before any thought of what to do about the walls, there is mourning. The Hebrew word is avel. It is the word used for mourning the dead. Nehemiah is not distressed about a delayed construction project. He is grieving a people, a city, and the name of God being reproached through the visible degradation of Jerusalem. He sits in the rubble of it emotionally before he ever picks up a stone. That tells you where the whole project comes from. The wall is not Nehemiah's career move. It is not his professional legacy. The grief tells you that. You do not weep for days over something that is primarily an opportunity for advancement. Now look at who Nehemiah is before any of this happens, because his position tells you something essential. He is the cupbearer to Artaxerxes, king of Persia. The title sounds like a servant's role, and it was. But the cupbearer to the Persian king was one of the most trusted positions in the entire empire. The king of Persia was the most powerful ruler on earth in the 5th century BC. And the person who handed him his wine every day, who tasted it first to protect him from poison, who stood within arm's reach of him daily, was not a minor functionary. The cupbearer had physical proximity, personal access, and the trust of the king in a world where proximity to the king was everything. Nehemiah has spent his career building that access. He is comfortable in the most powerful court in the world. He reads social situations with precision. He understands political timing. He knows how to ask for things. He is, by any measure, a man prepared by his position for exactly the negotiation that is about to happen. But none of that preparation is what he trusts. And that tension runs through the whole book. 4 months pass between chapter 1 and chapter 2. 4 months of grief and fasting and prayer before Nehemiah makes a single visible move. And when the moment finally comes, it is not one he manufactures. Nehemiah 2:1-2. In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was before him, I took up the wine and gave it to the king. Now I had not been sad in his presence. The king said to me, "Why is your face sad, seeing you are not sick? This is nothing but sadness of the heart." The king notices, not Nehemiah engineering a conversation, not Nehemiah requesting a private audience. The king looks at his cupbearer and sees 4 months of grief still sitting on his face and asks about it. Nehemiah 2:2. Then I was very much afraid. He is terrified. because showing personal distress before the king was dangerous. It could be read as dissatisfaction, disloyalty, instability, any number of things that ended careers or lives in Persian courts. Nehemiah had not arranged this. The moment arrived, and he was afraid. And then the king asks what he wants, and before Nehemiah answers, in the space of a heartbeat, in the middle of a royal audience with the most powerful man on earth watching him, he prays. So I prayed to the God of heaven and answered the king. That sentence is remarkable. There is no chapter break between the prayer and the answer, no time for a sustained petition, just a heartbeat of prayer inside a conversation that cannot pause. Nehemiah has been praying for 4 months, and he prays again for 1 second before he opens his mouth in front of the king. This is not a man who prays before meetings as a preliminary ritual and then relies on himself inside them. This is a man whose whole orientation to every moment is prayerward. The prayer in chapter 1 is long, structured, and theologically rich. The prayer in chapter 2, verse 4 is a breath. Both are real. Both belong to the same man. And when he answers the king, the words that come are precise, clear, fully formed. The timber request, the letters of safe passage, the timeline. 4 months of grief and prayer have clarified exactly what is needed. He asks for everything, and he gets everything. Verse 8. And the king granted me what I asked, for the good hand of my God was upon me. The good hand of my God. Not my years in this court paid off, not my timing was excellent. The hand of God was on the asking. That is how Nehemiah explains it. When Nehemiah arrived in Jerusalem, he does something that every leadership manual correctly highlights. He surveys the damage privately before he speaks publicly. Nehemiah 2:11-12. So I went to Jerusalem and was there 3 days. Then I arose in the night, I and a few men with me. And I told no one what my God had put into my heart to do for Jerusalem. 3 days of silence. Then a night ride around the broken walls, alone, before any announcement, any speech, any rallying of the people. He looks at the actual situation first. He does not describe what he imagines or remembers. He rides through the rubble in the dark and sees it for what it is. This is genuinely good leadership practice. Assess before you announce. Know what you are asking people to commit to before you ask them. The gap between a vision and a plan is information, and Nehemiah goes and gets the information before he opens his mouth. But notice how he describes the initiative. He told no one what God had put into his heart to do for Jerusalem. The project is not his idea. It is something God has put into his heart, and he is working out what that looks like on the ground before he describes it to anyone else. And then the speech. Nehemiah 2:17-18. You see the trouble we are in, how Jerusalem lies in ruins with its gates burned. Come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem, that we may no longer suffer derision. And I told them of the hand of my God that had been upon me, and also of the words that the king had spoken to me. 3 elements: the honest assessment of the problem, the direct call to action, and the evidence of divine involvement and royal authorization. He does not motivate by rhetoric alone. He tells them what God has done. And they said, "Let us rise up and build." And they strengthened their hands for the good work. Chapter 3 is the chapter every reader skips. A long list of names and gates and sections of wall, and the families assigned to each one. It looks like administrative record keeping, a project log. But read it again and notice who is doing what. Priests are laying stones. Goldsmiths are building wall sections. Perfumers are doing manual labor. Nehemiah 3:12 records that Shallum son of Hallohesh, ruler of half the district of Jerusalem, repaired with his daughters. In 5th century BC Jerusalem, daughters of a district ruler doing construction work is socially unusual enough that Nehemiah records it by name. And then, verse 5. And next to them, the Tekoites repaired, but their nobles did not stoop to serve their lord. He records the failure too. The nobles who refused to get their hands dirty while everyone around them worked, he puts that in the permanent record. The chapter that looks like dry administration is actually a theological document about who showed up and who did not. The wall is being built by people whose job descriptions said nothing about wall building. And the people whose social position should have made them the first to lead are the ones whose names are attached to an absence. Chapter 3 is not a project log. It is a judgment. Now, let's talk about the opposition he faced, because it begins the moment the work does, and it follows a pattern so precise it reads like a case study in how resistance to God's purposes actually works. First, mockery. Nehemiah 4, 2-3. Sanballat said in the presence of his associates and of the army of Samaria, "What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore it for themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they finish up in a day? Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of rubbish, and burned ones at that?" Tobiah the Ammonite was beside him, and he said, "Yes, what they are building, if a fox goes up on it, he will break down their stone wall." The mockery is calculated. It is public, performed before an army, designed to establish a narrative about the project's absurdity before it gains momentum. If you can make people laugh at a thing before it succeeds, you create the social pressure of being associated with a joke. Nehemiah's response is not a counter-narrative. It is a prayer. Nehemiah 4:4. "Hear, O our God, for we are despised. Turn back their taunt on their own heads." And then verse 6. "So we built the wall, and all the wall was joined together to half its height, for the people had a mind to work." The people had a mind to work. The Hebrew is lev la'am la'asat. The heart of the people was for the work, not talent, not ideal conditions. The heart, the inner directedness of the community. The people whose names fill chapter 3, priests and goldsmiths and perfumers and district rulers' daughters, they had decided in their hearts that the work was worth doing. When mockery fails, the opposition escalates. Threats of violence. Nehemiah stations armed guards at the exposed points of the wall. Half the workers hold weapons while the other half build. One hand on the sword, one on the trowel. And when violence fails, the opposition shifts again. Negotiation. 5 times they try to get Nehemiah off the wall and into a meeting in the plain of Ono, a day's journey from Jerusalem, far enough from the work to break momentum, far enough from the city to remove him from his support structure. The language is reasonable, conciliatory even. Let us talk. Let us work something out. Nehemiah's answer is 4 words, the same 4 words, 5 times. Nehemiah 6:3. "I am doing a great work, and I cannot come down." That may be the clearest sentence in the book. The opposition's final strategy is not violence. It is interruption dressed as conversation. If you can get a man off his wall long enough, often enough, eventually the wall stops being built. And Nehemiah sees through it with a clarity that comes from knowing exactly what he is there to do. I am doing a great work, not I am too busy, not the timing is difficult. A great work. He names its magnitude as the reason for his immovability. Then slander, then false prophecy from someone posing as a friend, urging Nehemiah to hide in the temple for his own safety. In Nehemiah 6:11, should such a man as I run away? He knows who he is. He knows what his role is, and his self-knowledge is precise enough that when someone wraps a dangerous suggestion in the language of prophecy, the falseness of it is visible immediately. He is not fooled because he already knows the answer to the question the false prophet is asking. The wall is completed in 52 days. Nehemiah 6:15 to 16. So the wall was finished on the 25th day of the month Elul, in 52 days. And when all our enemies heard of it, all the nations around us were afraid and fell greatly in their own esteem, for they perceived that this work had been accomplished with the help of our God. The enemies reached the same conclusion Nehemiah began with. The completion of the wall is not a testament to exceptional human leadership in isolation. It is a visible demonstration of divine involvement that even the opposition recognizes. The wall is an apologetic. Its existence argues for the God of Israel in a language every surrounding nation can read. But the hardest part of Nehemiah is not the wall at all. Chapter 5. Right in the middle of the building project, before the wall is finished, an economic crisis erupts from inside the community. The poorer workers who have left their fields to build the wall are running out of food. To survive, they are borrowing money from the wealthier members of the community, pledging their fields and vineyards as collateral. And the wealthy are charging interest for closing on debts, taking the fields, and in some cases, taking the children of the poor as debt slaves. The opposition is not outside the gate. It is inside the covenant people, while the wall is going up. Nehemiah 5:6. I was very angry when I heard their outcry in these words. The Hebrew is Vaichar Limeod. It burned within me greatly. He is furious, and he does something important with the anger before he acts on it. Verse 7. I took counsel with myself. Before the confrontation, before the accusation, before any public action, he deliberates internally. He examines what he knows, what is right, what the covenant requires. He takes the anger through his mind before he takes it to the people. And then he confronts the nobility publicly. He does not manage the conflict quietly. He does not protect the powerful at the expense of the poor in order to preserve team unity. Great assembly and names what is happening in front of everyone costs something. You can manage external opposition with strategy. Internal corruption requires something harder. It requires the willingness to turn the same standard of accountability on your own community that you apply to your enemies. And to do it publicly, on the record, in the middle of a project that still needs everyone's participation, requires wisdom. In the end, the wealthy comply. They restore the fields and the interest. And Nehemiah seals the commitment with a public gesture. He shakes out the fold of his garment. So may God shake out every man from his house and from his labor who does not keep this promise. The entire assembly says, Amen. Integrity enforced publicly in the middle of the work is what holds the community together long enough to finish it. And then there's the ending, which is far less tidy than most readings of Nehemiah want it to be. Nehemiah serves as governor for 12 years, returns to Persia, and then comes back to Jerusalem to find that everything he reformed has reverted. The Ammonite Tobiah, his chief enemy during the wall project, has been given a room inside the temple itself by the priest who was supposed to oppose him. The Levites have abandoned the temple because nobody is paying them. The Sabbath has become a market day. The people have intermarried in ways that violate the covenant, and their children cannot even speak Hebrew. Nehemiah responds with shocking severity. He throws Tobiah's furniture out of the temple room with his own hands. He stations Levites at the city gates to enforce the Sabbath. He confronts the offenders so fiercely that the book ends with a kind of unresolved violence rather than a clean reform narrative. And the last sentence of the entire book is this: Remember me, O my God, for good. Not, the work was done, the legacy was secured, the people were transformed. Remember me, O my God, for good. The prayer of a man who has built a wall, rebuilt a community, watched it unravel, and had to rebuild again. A man who is not confident the unraveling will not happen a third time. A man who commits the record of what he has done to God's evaluation because he cannot control what comes after. It does not confirm that great leadership produces permanent transformation. It confirms that faithful leadership in the hands of God produces what it is given to produce in the season it is given to produce. And the rest belongs to God. Nehemiah built the wall and knew he did not build the wall. He organized the people and knew God had given the people a mind to work. He asked for everything from the king and knew the good hand of God was on the asking. He prayed for 1 second in the middle of a royal audience because in Nehemiah's world, 1 second of prayer was not a pause in the strategy. It was the strategy. The 52 days are extraordinary, but they are not mainly a monument to leadership. They are a monument to what happens when a grieving man fasts and prays for 4 months and then picks up a trowel. And when it is done, when the wall stands and the enemies have seen it and fallen in their own esteem, the man who built it writes the simplest possible summary of his life's work into the permanent record. Remember me, O my God, for good. Not a leadership legacy statement, a prayer. The same thing it was at the beginning, the same thing it always was. And maybe a final lesson: build faithfully, pray constantly, and leave God to make it permanent. God bless you.
Hello, I'm Tim Sutton, the pastor of Clearwater Baptist Church. We are a country church with friendly people. Our mission is to reach and teach people for Jesus Christ. We are located on Farm Road 1448, Scroggins, Texas. We are so glad that you joined us for this live broadcast. Give all the praise to Jesus. Welcome to worship.